This is a good question. Let me do a little highlight here. So on occasion on the channel, there it is. On occasion on the channel, people ask questions. I encourage it. I think having discussions is wonderful. I think it's a lot of fun. I also think people can learn things, and it can be done respectfully. And so I think a lot of times it's difficult to have a conversation on any sort of like religious topic. But if we don't, who will? Right? We're going to take on that. So the question is the rapture the same as the second coming? Not according to Revelation 3:10 or Luke 29 through 30. Only think on the radio on my drive to Yosemite. So you might be listening to. I wonder if you're listening to Moody. It's a great radio station. So there's different opinions. Zhang, okay, so basically let me be upfront. I do believe that the only way that is biblically consistent is the pre-tribulational rapture view. And that's a complicated way to say that yes, the rapture, no, it's not the same as second coming, but yes, it happens first, as what Zhang's saying. There's three primary views when it comes to the rapture, but then there's three overarching views that are actually very, very different. So the overarching views that are like the big thing have to do with what does the Bible talk about end times in the first place? Does it teach that there is going to be a kingdom that Jesus brings in on the second coming? A millennial kingdom for 1,000 years. After that is eternity in heaven. The historical view, the view that was actually held by the early church, is the same as the view I hold, which is that there's a pre-millennial return of Jesus. Jesus returns. Yes, there's a lot of things that go on in Second Coming, Battle of Armageddon, things like that. You've heard those terms, but along with that is that he returns first, and then he brings in that kingdom. There are other views. There's another view that believes that the kingdom, we have to build the kingdom ourselves. We bring in a utopia through peace and prosperity on this earth. At the end, Jesus comes back and says, well done, guys, good job. A third, and perhaps even the most popular view today, just on the nature of the Catholic Church, because it's huge, is an amillennial, meaning no millennium, meaning that the millennium is actually here now, and it is this church. It's a spiritual millennium. Of those, the only view that doesn't actually take the Bible to be metaphorical, that takes the Bible literally, is the pre-millennial view. The rest have to treat it in different ways to be a metaphor of some kind, to not actually say what it's saying, and I just don't think that's a good habit to get into. So if you take it at its word, Jesus comes back before the millennium, he sets up the kingdom. But then you get into the second part, the sub-question. The sub-question is, when he comes back, is it before, during, or after the tribulation and end times and all of those sorts of things? And so that would be more specifically the question Nono was asking. Nono Roberto was asking of that view. So I just wanted to point out that there are large views. So if you're coming from like a Catholic background, you're like, I don't care, there is no millennial kingdom. We are the millennial kingdom. But if you are a pre-millennial view, which I believe is the biblically consistent way to read it, then I've lost this heavy Mustang several times. I'm gonna buy it. Then if that is the position that you take, then the question is, okay, does he arrive before the tribulation, in the middle of the tribulation, or at the end of the tribulation? And I believe that before is the only way to be consistent. There's actually, I've got like a top 10 reasons as to why. And so, how do we get there? According to the radio show, he comes back first, then after, and then after the rapture. Okay, right. So you're raised Catholic, and the dogmas of just heaven. Yeah, but Protestant groups seem to believe in the more Hebrew belief of second coming. Yeah. Just not expecting that. Expecting the conversation. I try to preface at the beginning that, yeah, we actually often have a theological conversation. And I encourage it. So anytime people have questions, I'm more than happy to discuss. Let's see here. Let's actually get... and I'm not done yet. Let's just... I just didn't want to fail miserably here. So yeah, no. I want to... This is more important to me. The game... The reason why I like this game is it allows a format of us having conversation. And so, basically there are... let me actually... I might even pull this up. I've done a like 2.5-year study on this with my church. And from that, one of the things, like, I try to have like a Cliff's Notes, a shortened takeaway. So I've got like a top 10 reasons why the rapture comes before the tribulation. And this, of course, is using the subgroup that believes in a rapture at all. Like I said, Catholics don't. The big part of it is just the fact that it is taught as imminent. And this is the main reason why the early church said, well, yeah, Jesus said it could happen any time, right? In the twinkling of an eye, that sort of thing. And so it's imminency. The idea that it's hanging over you, could drop at any time, is like where that word comes from. It is a word pictures imminency. And I could give you verse references if you're curious, but I won't try to bog the conversation down with that. Not everyone's going to care. So that's one. Another one is that the rapture is taught as a comfort. And this is a big one because the conversation comes up in the book of Thessalonians. That's a strange name for you if you haven't read the Bible. Thessalonians is just the name of people who live in the city of Thessalonica. It was a Greek city, ancient Greek city. And there's a church there. So he's writing a letter to the people who live at the church. And they were hearing from people being like, hey, did you guys hear? You missed the rapture. And they're like, say again? And like, oh, yeah, you missed the rapture. And so they write to Paul, who writes back, and this is where we get the answers. Like, and his answer is no, you did not miss the rapture, because they were all worried if we miss the rapture, they knew what happens next. And the idea was, after the rapture is the tribulation. They're like, we don't want to go there. And he says, no, you can be comforted, comfort each other with these words. That's when he... To paraphrase, that's when he's talking about the rapture. He says, look, this is going to happen before. That's why it's a comfort. It's not much of a comfort if you're saying, okay, you're going to get raptured out to be with Jesus. Rapture, by the way, means to be caught up in the air. We ascend up into the air. And it's not much of a comfort if you're like, all right, you're going to go through 7 years of the worst, horrible things man has ever seen, but at the end, it'll be great. It's not much of a comfort. Rapture. I do tend to put the bombardment, well, I wanted to try to at least hit that, but you're right, I'm probably going to waste some in the background of bombardment. I didn't put shields down. So the church was basically worried because they thought that they were going to be raptured first, and that is in fact what he's teaching, but they were hearing otherwise. And so that's why we even get to find out about the conversation, because he's like, you guys remember what I told you? It's going to happen in this way. I'm not going to give you all 10. I'm going to just give you another couple highlights here. There's this one. If the rapture happens at the end, the idea is, because the question originally was, is there two comings of Jesus? Does Jesus show up first and then take us in the rapture and then arrive later, second coming? Or is it just a single arrival and, all that? And so basically, people get confused with the idea of the rapture because they think that when Jesus arrives to collect us and take us up into heaven, that is his arrival on earth. He doesn't actually touch earth. It specifically talks about being in the clouds. And from that, what we get is how he has a very famous promise he makes to his followers. And he basically says, I've got to go leave. But if I leave, I'm going to return and come collect you and take you to be with me where my Father's house is. So don't let your heart be troubled. I will come back and take you with me to my Father's house. And this only makes sense if he actually takes us up to heaven. If he is on his way down to earth, to rule earth and be on earth, and we get raptured on his way down. So we show up in midair, and then we turn around, U-turn, and come right back down to Earth. We never arrive at the Father's house that he spent the last 2,000 years preparing for us. It actually just kind of becomes silly. So the fact that he said that we are going to go to the Father's house is a big one. A couple other things. So the rapture and the second coming are two separate events. A couple other things is just the church is never mentioned during the events of the tribulation in Revelation. It's completely absent. It talks about Israel, it talks about the world, never mentions the church. Once you get past the introductory, there's like a talk about first two or three chapters talking about present day. Then he goes into talking about future events. So I hope it didn't confuse people. I was trying to. It is a large topic, a topic that has multiple viewpoints that people do get in arguments over and get offended over and all that. I'm hoping we avoid all that. But I'm trying to also provide kind of an overview for people who have no idea what I'm talking about. So hopefully we accomplished all those. That I kind of gave you a hopefully clear answer, but also an answer that at least introduces other people to the concept of the discussion. Long story short, yes. Two visits, if you will. Jesus shows up in the clouds, collects us, takes us to the Father's house for 7 years of the tribulation, and then returns with us to the earth where he'll reign for 1,000 years. That's the literal interpretation of the Bible. All the other interpretations, and there's several, they all will compromise on, do we really believe what it says it's going to do? And so it has other versions of the events, and this is why people get upset with Christians on having all these different versions. If we're simply consistent and just say, well, I believe it the way it's written, in the grammatical, historical context of the passage, then you come to that conclusion. That's the only conclusion you can arrive at.